decent weather, and I hope that summer is now upon us. They say we are going to have a hot summer. It's just a question of when it's going to start, but maybe we're here now. So welcome everyone to our June 2025 Empowered Senior Speaker Series. We're at our 25th session. How many of you today are the first time joining us? Wonderful, thank you so much. We're glad to have you here, and we hope to see you again. We hope that you find the sessions today valuable. And then just based on that, it's looking like most of you have been here before. And so thank you so much for coming back, for your support. We're great to see that we're offering something that you find of value. We certainly do enjoy putting this on, and we look forward to continuing in the future. For those who don't know me, my name is Marion Goard. I'm a real estate broker here in Burlington, and I specialize in working with older adults, later in life moves. And so the word, I'm a realtor, so I'm looking after real estate transactions. But what I've found over time that I've been doing this, is that it's not, the real estate is a piece of what I do, but really it's about your life transition. At this point in our lives, when we're moving on and have to make a change, there's lots that comes into play. People I just actually spoke to a man, they've been in their house since, I think he said, the 70s, and looking at making a change. So that doesn't come easily. And so I'm happy to be the one that can help you through that, and also to bring into play any kind of the other educational, or the educational partners, but any of the other service providers that we can be of service to you. So it's through that experience that I've had over the last few years working with older adults and seniors and their families that I realized that sessions like this, there was a big void in our community. COVID didn't help that any, so we launched this session, these sessions in June 2023, and we're continuing to present them. Just wanted also to just acknowledge and thank our educational partners. Some of them have been with us since the beginning of time. Since the beginning of these sessions, and very grateful to them for their support and their encouragement, their coaching, and their help in putting these together. And I'll just let them introduce themselves. Kim?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Rutledge, and I am the sales consultant for Vistamere Retirement Residence in South Oakville. And I'm here today just to support your journey if you're researching at this time. So please come by and visit with me if you have any questions. I'm very happy to chat with you to learn about independent living and any of the different levels. I have some information here with pricing and as well as layouts, suite layouts. So I'm happy to meet you today and answer those questions for you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Neela White. I'm a senior investment advisor and portfolio manager with Blue Wing Advisory Group, Raymond James. And I have been one of the educational sponsors since day one, so I have been here since the dawn of time. And you know what, it's something that I am proud to say that I'm a part of. I think the most important thing that we can always come away with is reliable, transparent information. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a registered nurse and clinical leader with Bayshore Home Health. We deliver home care services using the neighborhood health teams model. So what that means is we have PSWs and personal caregivers to help you with any and all of your day-to-day tasks, but we also provide you with the support of a nurse for any health concerns and general advice and support. Our goal is to help people stay at home as long as they can with help in place.
Hello, my name is Marion. I am a hearing instrument specialist at Hearing Well Matters, just up around the corner on Maple Avenue there. And we take care of everything to do with your ears, from removing earwax to testing your hearing and fitting hearing aids and adjustments and all that good stuff. So if you have any concerns to do with your ears, please do stop by and ask me any questions.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicola Dollar and I'm from Chartwell Lakeshore Retirement Residence here in Burlington, just down Lakeshore Road, right on the south side, so beautiful views of the lake. We're here today if you have any questions about retirement living. At our property we do offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care as well, so you do have the opportunity to age in place. We are hosting a menu tasting at our property on June 20th, so if you are interested, it is complimentary. So a nice way to come in and check out the residents and try out the food.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Fermi, and I'm here with my colleague Kelly in the back, and we are with Compassionate Care collaborators. There are 3 of us, and we are end-of-life doulas, and we can provide assistance in anything related to end-of-life care, starting from right now when you're healthy and you just want to plan in advance, to providing support at the bedside when that time is coming, but also doing a lot after the person has died. And we work with both the individual as well as their loved ones. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sunnucks. I'm with Smith's Funeral Home, and I'm just going to introduce my colleague Kara here. She is only been with Smith's for 2 weeks, so she's very new, and this is part of her training, is to see what we do at Smith's. So thanks for coming. Don't ask her any questions, she doesn't know.
Thanks, everybody. Just also to acknowledge there are educational partners who aren't here with us today. There's Irene Zioba, 360 Downsizing. Many of you have met her over the course of time. And she did a presentation at our expo. We've got Cola Care, Burlington, Hamilton, Home Care Providers, Jared Sia, again, he's away traveling. Fluid Senior Transitions, Jeanette Bach, who else is Grant Hooper was with Chartwell Oakville, so we've got Chartwell Lakeshore here, but we also had Chartwell Oakville represented, and again, he's not here with us today. And Parkland Ancaster, they are a retirement community in Ancaster. They offer a variety of services. They have independent living, full assisted living, and something in between. So once again, thank you all very much. We really do appreciate your support. If you haven't had a chance to speak with them, I know there's not a whole lot of time before, but don't feel that you need to rush out. They are here for you, and each one of them, I know them all personally, and they are people who you can rely on and count on, and to put your needs first and not their own. So again, they don't come very highly recommended. Also, just to acknowledge Lisa right here and Ida at the door there. Today we got surprised a little bit. The room wasn't ready for us, so what did these girls do? We were schlepping chairs and getting the room together for us today. So thank you, but that's not all they do. They're always here having Today we have Sarah, where she's running around with the camera. So Sarah is she's my virtual assistant, my sort of behind the house, behind the scenes kind of girl. If she's taking pictures and you don't want to be in any pictures, we are planning to use those for social media and on public sites. If you don't want your image posted, please do let her know. But otherwise, thank you to anybody who she's caught and took a picture of and videotaped. That goes a long way to help us to get the word out to more people about our event. And here we are celebrating 2 years. I am really excited. I'm incredibly proud, very thankful, and truly appreciative again of all the support, and that you folks keep coming out, supportive of our educational partners, and celebrating 2 years. So again, we started in June of 2023. Kind of went out and said, okay, we're going to do this. I don't know who's going to come, how it's going to turn out, but here we are 2 years later, and it's a room full of people and continuing to grow. So thank you all very much. It's a birthday, so you can't have a birthday without treats, so before you leave, there'll be something for you, a little takeaway. You're welcome to be here today. And also, actually I don't want to really point out any individual, but this man I have to. So we've got Ron Rodwell is sitting up here in the front. Ron told me today he turned 98 just earlier this month. He's been, I'm pretty sure, at all of our sessions. He has a mission to be the first one in the door. The last little while he's having a little competition, but Ron, thank you so much. It's people like you that's why we're here, to be able to provide those services and information to you, so thank you. Before we get started with our presentation, just a few one of the housekeeping notes was, please turn off your phones. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, that was almost like it was keyed up. You've got some notepads on your chairs. Those are for you just to jot down anything that you find interesting and important that you want to capture, but also just if you have any questions, please do jot them down there. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the session, and we'll run around with the microphone so that everybody can hear the questions and we have a wholesome conversation. If anybody has any, actually I should have asked at the beginning. At the back, can everybody hear? You're good? Perfect, thank you. If you have any trouble, there's a few extra seats up at the front. Parking. So parking here, we are on the honor system. So we've been asked to pay $3 when you enter or exit. So please honor the honor system, please. And yeah, no telephones. Okay, so today we're all here. What better thing to talk about on a birthday? It's about funerals. I don't know how we figured that one out, but
Well, last year I did speak on my birthday, so maybe that.
There we go.
okay, so we have Sarah Sunnucks from Smith's Funeral Home. Yes, and she did speak before. You're in for a treat. She's an excellent presenter. Just by way of introduction, Sarah, she attended Heritage College with a certificate in counseling, and then went to Humber College and graduated as a licensed funeral director in 2012. She's married with, how many? 5 children. And she's still smiling. And is passionate about educating individuals and families on the benefits of planning ahead. Her vast knowledge is a direct result of her a few more years, her career at Smith's Funeral Home, where she helps guide families in navigating all aspects of end-of-life planning. Her expertise extends to palliative care, death and dying, executor and estate checklists, to name a few. Smith's Funeral Home is the oldest and only family-owned funeral home in Burlington, and they've been around since 1938. So, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. This picture was the day I started at Smith's. You can see my hair's grown. Did I just press this? All right, so thank you so much for coming. I'm very excited to be here today to present to you. Yes, I did present last year in May on my birthday, so I wore a big birthday button, so that was fun. So today we're going to talk about funerals, which I know everyone loves to talk about death. It's the best conversation, right? I know it's not, but definitely it's something we all have to know about, right? Because I did have someone ask me, like, who is your best client? And I said, well, everybody, right? Because everyone is going to pass away at some point. And so I'm here just to educate, give you lots of tools and tips. Obviously, I am a funeral director, not a lawyer or accountant, but definitely I have lots of knowledge I want to pass along. So I just want to speak briefly about Smith's Funeral Home. I know it has a wonderful reputation in Burlington. We did start in 1938 with Don Smith's dad, Wilbert. And I did want to mention, Jeanette, Don's aunt, so they were brother and sister that started. She was one of the first female embalmers in Canada. So we've always had women at the helm at Smith's. It's something we really pride ourselves on. And we do have more females than males on our staff today. In 1942, we moved to the Brant Street location, which is what you all know and love. And it's expanded from there. And of course, Don and his brother Doug also grew up in the funeral home right at Brant. And then now Don is our president. In 1995, that's when Don took over the helm, and then we purchased the fire station on Guelph Line, which we then converted into a funeral home, and it's all one level, and it fits about 300 people if you use the Home Depot parking lot, so we have lots of room for that. And then in 2002, we bought a funeral home in Grimsby. So Grimsby has a family-owned funeral home. That's the only funeral home in Grimsby, but we kept the name, so it's almost been Stonehouse Wickham for almost 100 years now. So it's quite a long history that we've been in Grimsby. And then in 2008, we bought Stony Creek Funeral Home. So it's now Smith's Funeral Home, which is close to where I live. I do like going to that location, but of course I'm in Burlington all the time as well. And then this is just a nice little picture of me and Don. Don is such a wonderful man to work for. He does have such a heart for philanthropy. I'm sure if you've ever been to an event, we've sponsored that event in some way. That's Don's way to give back to his community that he loves. So who am I? I am a licensed funeral director. I do have a background in bereavement supports. So Smith's was actually one of the first funeral homes in the 70s to hire an on-staff bereavement counselor. It was unheard of to do bereavement counseling in the 70s. It was just not a mental health issue. You know, you were just supposed to deal with it and move along. We were one of the first ones to hire a bereavement counselor. She was with us for a long, long time, Cherry Cross, if any of you had the pleasure of meeting her. She has unfortunately passed away, and so when they were trying to hire someone to kind of help with families, when I said I have bereavement supports, they're like, you're perfect, you're in, you got it. you're what we need. And then my primary role is pre-planning, but I do help afterwards with checklists. And then I have been doing the pre-planning since 2008, so it's something that I always kind of had my hand in for a bit. And then my brother has special needs. He is on ESP, he can't work. So anytime we have families that have that situation, I really like to help them out. And then my parents live in another country. So again, having parents in another country, their state is really complicated. So anyone who has kids in other countries, I'm your gal, because I have situations like that as well. And then of course, I wanted to show you this. So I just kind of put that in there. This is my crew. So I'm going to start with this personal story. So this lady in the middle is my grandmother. My grandmother was an organic farmer. And when she was an organic farmer, it wasn't popular, right? She didn't make a lot of money, but she loved to have a farm. And I know she was an organic farmer because every summer I had to get up at 6 o'clock and squish potato bugs with my fingers. So I know she was organic, because there's no way we did that without her being organic. And so when she got cancer, stomach cancer, we were all shocked. She got cancer at 77, and it progressed very quickly. She ended up passing away within a few months. So her being an organic farmer, it was just not something we thought was gonna happen. Now during those 3 months, we did palliative care, and she lost a lot of weight. And my grandmother, like myself, you know, we always kind of looked, we got the cheekbones and all of that happening. She didn't look well when she passed. Her cheeks had swollen in, she definitely lost a lot of weight. I had the pleasure of being in the hospital with her when she was passing. And so when we walked into the funeral home, I was only 17. And the funeral director said, would you like Muriel to look like she normally looks? Well, I don't know what that means, right? What does it mean to look like you normally look? So we said, yes, we do want her to look how she normally looks. And so we went into a private room, and she was in her casket she had prearranged for. She had paid 77 cents a month on her prearrangement. And she was in a nice white and blue dress, which happened to be her wedding dress, because she didn't have a white dress when she got married, it was blue. And it was a blue casket, it was really sweet. We walked in, and I expected to see her as I had seen her at the hospital. And when I walked in, she looked like my grandma. She was peaceful, her face was back to having cheeks again, and she just looked like she was sleeping. And for me, that was it. I want to give people that feeling. I want to give people the idea that their loved one, the one that they cared for, is okay. They're fine now. They're not in pain and they're not hurting. So let's go to today. And this is what Smith's provides. So we provide something a little bit different. We have people call the funeral home and they say, I just want a cremation. I don't want people to go through hardships. I don't want people to have a hard time. I don't want the fuss. I don't want anything bad. And so they give us a call and they say, the hospital was horrible. And they were on breathing tubes. And they passed away and there was beeping and noise. And it was just so traumatic, right? They lost a bit of weight. And so then I present just what I presented to you now. We can provide them to look like how they did. We can give you a moment just to have a different last experience. And that's how we do things differently. We provide a room, they're dressed, they look the way they used to look. There's no beeping, there's no nurses, There's no in and outs, there's no other family members. It's just a moment just to say goodbye. We provide that for every family, for every cremation. We also schedule the cremation on a certain day and time, just like a doctor's appointment. We know the person's gonna be cremated on this day and time. You can come with us, but you have the assurance that it's that person at all times. There's a few things going on in the news and on TV shows and things like that. We are not like that. That would never happen to Smiths. The assurance that we give people is that we know it's your person because we know when they were cremated, and it's our staff at all times. Okay, if you take nothing away today, I want you to take this away. When people call the funeral home, the first thing they say is, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know where their paperwork was. I didn't know. Sometimes we've had the call where someone's sitting on their cell phone Googling simple cremation, basic cremation, like they're just Googling what comes up first. Nobody should ever be in that position. Nobody, where they've just lost someone and they're Googling what they're gonna do next, right? That's why we're here today, because we don't want that to happen. So if you just make the plan of who do you call if I die, just that, you've done a lot, right? And this is for anyone, at any location, any place you go, just make sure someone knows who to call. And like Marion says every week, have a plan. Like I said, we're all going to be there at some point, so why don't we have plans? Power of attorney is very important. We see people get into car accidents, we see people who have mental decline, and they don't have power of attorney, and so it becomes very complicated. Banks are hard to manage when you have power of attorney. You really, it's a difficult scenario. You should have, luckily lawyers are now doing power of attorney with wills. Like it's really good that you can get them done as a package. That's what we did. But like you need to have power of attorney. Your power of attorney needs to know, where are your bills? Where are things coming out? What are your health concerns? What are your health plans, right? And then I put current will. People will call and they say, oh yeah, they had a will. Okay, can you bring it in, let me see it, or what does it say? Oh, it's from 1977 and everyone is deceased. Well, that's not a will. That is not a current will. We cannot use that. We just had someone come in with a holographic will. A holographic will means handwritten will. The problem with a handwritten will is I don't know if it's a true will or not. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not taking this person to court. So those are complicated too. Having a will is just letting us know who you want us to talk to. That's really what a will is for. I just met with someone yesterday, 79 years old. Do you have a will? No. I don't need a will because I have nothing. Well, that's not actually true. You have a person that I have to deal with. Okay, so do you have any, so we walk through what happens without a will. So that's my next slide. Who's in charge if you don't have a will or your will is not current? Okay, so it's not an updated, like I had mentioned, the 1977 will, right? So, number one, for the funeral home, so this is the funeral home's law, our automatic next of kin is your spouse. So if you say you're married, we're gonna assume that's your next of kin, okay? Now spouse is very different today than it was 10 years ago. A spouse could be common law. A spouse could be separated. A spouse could be living in a different home, right? I have one spouse that lives in a different country right now, and they're saying they're spouses. So like, what does spouse actually mean, right? So this is without a will. Remember, this is without a will. It has to be your spouse. Common law status is the most difficult because common law means that there's two witnesses to the relationship. So we're not just roommates, we're husband and wife. Well, you don't have any legal paperwork, right? If there's no legal paperwork, to me, you're just a roommate by law. You're just a roommate without legal paperwork. So I have to ask for, and get this is within like 24 hours of someone dying. I have to ask your spouse, Do you have joint bank accounts? Do you have joint credit cards? Are you joint on a mortgage? Are you joint on a lease? You know, I have to ask for all this proof just to deal with you. And you're trying to say my husband of 20 years is gone, right? Like, it's not an easy task to try to organize someone's life after the fact. Now, common law status, if we can get it completed, then yes, you are considered the next of kin. If a lawyer says you are common law after a year or 6 months, which is true, that's when you're living. When you're living. There's a whole different law when someone's passed away for common law. So there's living common law and there's common law status when you're gone. Now, some of you here are thinking about your own children, right? Because, you know, most of the people I know are common law, right? They just don't want the piece of paper or the cost. So if they're common law, especially, I'm thinking about women with children. If you're living with a man and he owns the house, if he passes away, common law status doesn't automatically give you a home. Like, it's not a marital asset because there's no marriage. So there's so many things about common law that are really, really tricky. I encourage you to talk to your children about common law status and how difficult it can be. Okay, if your spouse is gone or you don't have a spouse, the next of kin is your children of age. Again, just recently, we had a death. Children of age means 18. Okay? If you don't have a will, I'm sitting with your 19-year-old son planning your funeral because they're of age and they're your next of kin. So the other thing about your children, as you saw, I have 5. All of them have equal say. Okay, they all have equal say. So if you have one child that you think would be better at planning a funeral or better at your finances or better at your, you know, that's why you need a will, is because you want to pick them over the other children. And they all have to sign off in some way. They all have to be available for it. So we get into trouble because sometimes they don't want to get along. And sometimes it's on purpose that they don't want to get along. And so sometimes we're sitting in rooms going, can you at least agree to cremation? Can you at least agree to one thing? Can you at least agree to, just getting them to all agree to one thing. And then once we get the one thing, we let them go to court, right? Like, that's really what we can do. Okay, if your children are underage and your parents are still alive, it's grandparents are next, then grandchildren. If you don't have any of that, if you're a single person your whole life, it's your siblings. And it's all of your siblings, regardless as if they're in long-term care, retirement, in another country, they're all considered your next of kin. So again, same problem. The more siblings you have, the more problems for this sort of situation. So those are all next of kin. And then it goes down from there. So the next logical question is, if someone dies without a will and they have nothing, okay, they have nothing, or if someone dies without a will and they have no family. So we have both of those scenarios. So this is just more general information for all of you, but this is important for me to educate. So the left-hand side is when no one wants to take responsibility. And we've had a few of these recently where the person had money. They had significant money, but nobody took responsibility for them. And so there is something in the government called public guardian and trustee. So they typically step in, and what they do is we work with them, and the person has to have over $30,000 for them to help us. But basically they help us deal with the burial or sometimes cremation of that person. Okay, it's very complicated, it's a long process, but basically that's how the government takes the money. When you hear, if you don't have a will, the government takes your money, that's what they're talking about. Public guardian trustee has to take over. Now the government doesn't come and take your whole bank account. What they do is they have to investigate, they have to look if you have second cousins, you know, they have to kind of figure it out, okay? The other side is, what if someone passes away without any money? They might have family, but they have zero income. So an example is my special needs brother. He's on Ontario disability. He's been on that his whole life. He will be on that till he passes. He qualifies for what's called regional supports. So regional supports kicks in, and one of the tasks is they pay us for the funeral. So the family doesn't pay us unless they want to upgrade. So there's a few upgrades they can do, but typically they get approved and then the region takes over. Now if you use regional supports, they take the death certificate. So they get the death benefit if there's one, they get access to the bank. Now, my job is really important because if someone comes in and prearranges for their funeral, and I say, okay, we're gonna talk about payments. And they say, well, I'm on ODSP. If I start a payment plan with this person, they automatically disqualify themselves from help. So it's a good thing I'm not on commission because I'm gonna educate them and say, listen, if you prearrange with me, that's considered life insurance in regional supports. And so you automatically disqualify yourself for any help. Now sometimes families do want to prearrange for their loved one, they just want to make sure their wishes are known. But I always educate people on what they can do if the person has nothing. Now you can't be approved before death, you can only be approved after death, that's what makes it also complicated. And you can't have any assets. Like you can't even have a car that's broken down on the driveway in your name, even if it's worth nothing, it's an asset. Okay, so you have to literally have less than 5,000. All right, so now that I've scared you all into having wills, which was the point, who should be your executor? So I love this article I found because nowhere on this sheet does it say your firstborn child. Nowhere there does that say the kids, right? I don't know why in our culture we feel like that's the best person to have as your executor. I heard someone say this actually at this group. Think of it as a job. You're hiring someone to the job of being your executor, right? So if you would not actually hire them for this job, why are you letting them do it, right? So trustworthiness is number one. Financial knowledge is number two, and I would say that's a pretty big one. If your child is struggling, doesn't have any savings, doesn't have any money, they're probably not going to be the best executor. Organization, the age and longevity and health of the person. We have a lot of executors who are palliative themselves, so that's really difficult. Time availability, if it was me, I would have put that higher. And then mental health, right? You don't want someone who can't manage their own mental health going through a death than being your executor, right? That's just gonna make it worse. All right. These are just some of the decisions that someone has to make when they come into a funeral home or a cremation place. So these are the things that we present to people. So on this list, I have some really important cues. So one of them is, what is your mother's name and her maiden name, and where was she born? Now you know that information, hopefully, but do your children know that information about you? Right? Would they know that in a stressful time? Would they just automatically know? For me, I'm like, oh, are you from Burlington and you're this age? You were born in Hamilton, because that was the only hospital available, right? But do they know your mother's maiden name? Do they know all this vital information? Do they know your birthday? Do they know when you were married? There's a whole bunch of information we ask. Social insurance numbers. Do you have cemetery property? That's something there's no registry for cemetery. There's no I can Google cemetery and your name pops up. You have to tell people what you have. Okay, moving on. Yeah.
Can I ask you, do you have copies of those last two?
Yeah. If anyone wants information, just email me. Okay, I'll send you whatever you want. Yeah, no problem.
I'll send the slides.
Oh yeah, and Marion's going to send out these slides. Okay, so we're going to move on to, these are the options in Ontario today for what we call disposition of the body. So I hope there's some things on there that you don't know, because we're going to learn today. So in Burlington, we are at a high rate of cremation. I would say about 80-85% cremation as the decisions. that we see at Smith's. In Stony Creek, I'm about 50%. Because just of the group we handle there, their religious beliefs, Orthodox being one of them, they cannot cremate. So we handle a lot more burial in Stony Creek. And then Grimsby, same, we have a lot more burial. So with cremation, there's a lot of options. So this urn here is what we call a companion urn. So the idea is you're buying it once and you're both going to be in it together. So I have a little joke. I presented this to a lady and she said, I've had to sleep with my husband in the same bed for 50 years. I'm not going to be in the urn. I told her I was going to do that too. A companion urn, though, as sweet as it sounds, it is complicated because I can't bury it when the first person passes, right? Because I have to wait for the second one. So you do have to kind of think these through. Will it fit into a niche wall? So there's walls that are in cemeteries. Will it fit in there? I'm not sure, right? You can take cremated remains, and you can do a lot with them. So I have a picture here of like some blown glass. I've had people use them for different options in paintings and different things. This is what we call a keepsake urn. So at Smith's, any portion we take out, we call it a keepsake, just so we have language around that. And then there's necklaces. There's lots of things you can place remains into. You're legally allowed to do anything you want with cremated remains, except for putting them on the golf course. But I know people do that. Okay, we're gonna move on to, so we call it green burial. It's really, the idea is an all-natural burial. So the idea here, the thought process here, is that I wanna leave nothing, I don't wanna add to the earth for my death. That's the process, that's the thought process. So no embalming, no chemicals, the casket is all natural, there's no metals, there's no dyes, and I'm gonna be placed into a place that's going to be covered in natural foliage, and it's gonna be beautiful, right? There's no monument. It's just kind of going back. I think of it as like 150 years ago, you know, you're buried in the backyard, right? And you just went back to the earth. We happen to be a green burial funeral home. What that means is we're committed to having this for people who want it. In Ontario, however, any burial has to legally be in a cemetery. That's the laws at the moment. And so we call our cemeteries that have green burial hybrid cemeteries. What that means is they have a regular cemetery and then they have a green section. Okay, so this is just a note of a few. Mount Hamilton is probably the closest to us. And then of course, me being me, I went for a little trip to Picton, Ontario, and walked around the grounds at the one there. It is beautiful, it's in a forest, you know, there's a pathway with sawdust, you just walk along and it's just a beautiful sight. Again, the idea is that you're not adding anything to the ground, everything's going back to nature. The reason why we really shouldn't be calling it green burial is because we drive a car to get there. Okay, aquamation. So this is the idea that instead of using fire for cremation, we're using water and a solution and agitation. So we don't have anything available in this area for this. The only available areas are east of Toronto. So Kingston has one, there's a few small areas there. I just happen to know the owner of the Kingston one, so he was able to let me see one happen recently. Basically the idea is there's no casket, there's no clothing, you're just kind of agitated to a powdery substance is the idea. You're left with basically the same thing that you have with cremated remains. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Now, the Kingston Funeral Home said they add CO2 to it at the end, and when it goes back to the sewer system, it's actually biodegradable. There's nothing harmful, supposedly. I'll say supposedly because I don't know. Okay, the last option is body donation. So I get this question quite a bit. I want to just donate my body to science. I don't need a funeral home, right? And that's actually true. If you donate your body to science, You don't need to use a funeral home unless you want to use this for a celebration of life. Body donation are typically through universities, through their anatomy programs. There is a restriction on height and weight. There is a restriction on how you pass away. You can't have any cuts. And there's a restriction on how many they take every year. And then if you decide to do organ donation, so that's donating parts of your organs, you again disqualify for body donation because it's an anatomy program, right? Like they want you whole. And the law is if they can use an organ, they'll use the organ. Okay, that's the law. So helping humans first, anatomy programs are always second. So if you've signed up for both, you might need a backup plan, right? Because if you do end up getting organ donation, you won't qualify typically for anatomy. We have a few, actually one just happened recently where she wanted to be body donated, but she prearranged with me as well as the backup because she wanted a backup. When she went for donation, we refunded the estate the entire amount. So we were a good backup because then she got a little bit of money for the estate and they didn't need Smiths. All right, I'm going to move on to celebration of life. So these are just, I could do slides and slides and slides of what we offer at Smiths for celebrations, but these are just a few I thought were really neat. This gentleman over here on the left, he grew up very poor. And so when he passed away, he wanted people to donate new shoes to go to the foster care system. So that was something he wanted everyone to bring new shoes in for his visitation. The middle here is what we call an urn arc. This is just a way we can present an arc at like kind of the front of a room and have everyone kind of gathered. So it's not like a casket's present, right? It's the person's still there, but it looks a little bit nicer. And then the one on the right is a school teacher. And again, she just wanted things donated, school bags for kids, that sort of thing. So when I think of a celebration of life, I think of celebrating you, who you are, who you represent, and how do people want to remember you, right? One gentleman had a beer stein collection, and the executive's like, what am I going to do with 200 beer steins? Like, what am I going to do with them? And I said, bring them to the visitation and make everyone take one. And they did. So he was left with just a box of them. So it was a great plan. All right. Why do we do funerals? Why do we exist? Why does Smith's Funeral exist? The first thing is when someone passes away, we want your loved one to acknowledge that something big has happened to them. You know, we want to protect our children from harm, we want to protect them from sadness, but when their loved one passes away, it's a big deal. Something big has happened. So regardless of how little they do with us, it's still a big deal to them, right, that they've lost somebody. So when people are sitting with me afterwards and they start crying, which is typical, I always tell them, I like when you cry because it shows me that you love the person. You know, grief is that loss of love that you had, that loss of connection. And so it actually forces us to try to have connection with others. So when people say, I'm glad we had the celebration, I'm glad we had the visitation because people came up to me and said such great things about my loved ones, right? That's the connection. We're reminding them that they were important. Storytelling is also a great way to get information across, just like I'm doing today. All the stories you guys are remembering, everything else is forgotten. But we want to tell the story of a person, you know. My dad's a missionary in Africa. He builds wells and he builds schools for Muslims as a Christian. That's what he does. When he passes away, I want to tell people about it, right? Because he's an amazing person. And if he passed away and I did nothing, I hold on to that grief, right? I want to tell people what an amazing person. He happens to be extra amazing, but. And then grief, death is actually classified in mental health as the most difficult thing you go through. Divorce is number 2, so death is number 1, right? That separation of that person, whatever that connection might be. Now, that doesn't mean every death you go through is like that, right? My relationship with my mom is different than your relationship with your mom was. My relationship with my husband's different than your relationship with your spouse. You know, my connection with my kids are different between each kid, right? So we're talking about any connection that you have to that person. And it can be an expensive event. We're now doing catering with wine and beer. We just had one. I'm trying to think of what they had. They had his favorite shot at at the funeral home. So it's ginger, beer, and whiskey. I don't know, something I've never heard of, but maybe you guys know. But yeah, they wanted his favorite drink. And so at the funeral home, we obviously had food, sandwiches, fruit tray, that sort, and everyone got his favorite shot. And they all cheered him, and it was just such a great thing to see because they just wanted to acknowledge what a great person he was. But that can be expensive. Not everyone can cater an event, at the drop of a hat. Not everyone can pay for all the expenses. So, naturally, we're going to move on to what your executor has to do. So the first thing they have to do is deal with me. The second thing they have to do is their checklist. And I call it a checklist because there is a way of doing things where you don't get into a mess. So the first thing I want people to apply for is the Canada Pension Benefits. So if you were here last month, Service Canada came in and they talked about CPP benefits. One of my tasks at the funeral home is to get the benefit for every family. And I call it a task because it is difficult to get people to come back in and actually fill it out. But it's really important because when your spouse passes, you only get a portion of their CPP. It's not a full 60%, it's a portion of it. And so you need to be prepared, to make sure that happens. There's the death benefit. We want to make sure you get that. I also happen to apply for the common law status death benefit. It's really difficult to get, but I do try to get it if you're a common law spouse. I know other funeral homes don't. They just do it for marriage certificates. I do it for common law status as well. But it is a difficult task to do. Other thing is probate. So again, I get this question all the time. What is probate? How do I avoid probate? What should I do about probate? I have a lot of executors who don't even know that there's a death tax in Canada. They don't even know it exists. I didn't know there was a death tax. I didn't have to pay it when my mom passed away or my dad passed away. There's a death tax in Canada. It's called estate administration fees. Now, does everyone across the board pay it like in the States? No, not everyone pays it. There are ways to avoid it. There are places that you don't. But majority of the people pay probate when the second spouse passes. Majority. So what that means, I'm going to use my hands. Joint accounts. Single accounts. Okay? Joint accounts, someone's name is here, someone's name is here. Not power of attorney, joint. Okay? So joint bank accounts, once the person's passed, the other person owns it, right? Joint. Single means one person owns that account. And that means once you pass away, the bank has the right to freeze it, and they have the right to ask for estate administration probate, okay? So if you have even a savings account in your name alone, and everything else is joint, guess what? Frozen, right? If you have an investment without a beneficiary listed on it, then it goes to the estate. So anything that says to the estate of can go through probate. Now, probate does start at $50,000. It's 1.5%, and it's the entirety of your estate, your single assets. So I have a tax-free savings account. My husband's the beneficiary. If I pass away, it flows to him. If he changes the beneficiary to our children, it flows to them. Flowing happens. If he doesn't change the beneficiary, and I'm listed as the beneficiary, probate. Are you seeing the? Okay, good. So joint, no. Single, probate. Okay? So I get the question, if my dad passes away and my mom is living, should I put my name on her bank account? Should I put my name on her house? Should I put my name on? So I always say, listen, I'm not a lawyer or an accountant, I'm not a professional. However, I do know if you put your name on your mom's house and it's not your primary residence, you have capital gains, right? Capital gains is what? 60%, around that amount. So if you have to pay a tax, wouldn't you rather pay the 1.5%? I would rather pay the 1.5% than the 60% on my own income tax, right? So it's like a whole big picture you have to work through with the right professionals, okay? So if you have your daughter or your son on your house and you know it's their secondary residence, you better have a talk with them because they're gonna get a bill, right? When is the probate due? It is due first. So you pay the funeral, then you pay the probate, okay? Once the probate's paid, then you have access to the estate funds. So I always say your first job as an executor is paying the bills, right? Paying the bills, that's the first job. The second, well, after the funeral, the next one is assessing all the assets. So if you have a house and you need it assessed, you need a real estate agent to assess it for you for probate. There's all these assessments that have to happen. If you have a gun collection, if you have jewelry, if you have coins, these are all things that people ask me about. I found out if you have a gun collection and you want it to go to your kid, if your kid doesn't have a gun license, he can't have it. He has to get a gun license. Surprise, kid! You gotta get a gun license before you can take my guns. That only happened to one family, thankfully. Income tax, okay? Death and taxes, right? You have to pay income tax on even if you pass away in January of 2026, you have to pay income tax for January. You have to pay income tax for 2026. Okay, so there's always income tax. And CRA can reassess you for up to 7 years, that estate. So they're allowed to come back, even down the road. So there's something called a clearance where you can ask CRA to audit you ahead of time. So as you can see, there's a lot your executor has to do. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's a full-time job, but it's definitely a part-time job, right? It's something you have to deal with. I might put this down. Okay, so of course I'm going to talk about how do we take one thing off the plate, right? How do we make it a little bit easier knowing all of this about funerals and estates? Well, I'm offering that you can pre-arrange and prepay and get everything set up ahead before you pass away. You can make all of your choices, you can decide on everything ahead of time, and that money is invested. Now it's invested in a third-party account with the funeral home as the beneficiary. So if something were to happen to the funeral home, your money is still your money. It's still in your name. You can change the beneficiary to any funeral home in Canada. So it's a very safe fund in that way. It stays in your name till death. I've had people move to Burlington or move to Grimsby from other locations. I just had one move from Ottawa to here because their daughter is here, they want to be here, right? So I just call the company and I change the beneficiary to Smith's Funeral Home and I pull the pre to me. There's no canceling, nothing happens to it, it just gets designated to a new beneficiary. There's two accounts that we use. There's a trust account, similar to what a lawyer uses when you hire a lawyer, and there's insurance. There's also life insurance at the funeral home. Now, Smith's, we don't offer life insurance. We used to, we don't anymore. Those are the plans where you can pay over 20 years, and you can pay a little bit each month. What that is, though, is they've added life insurance to it. So you're paying, half goes to your funeral, half goes to life insurance. If you were to die while you're paying, the whole thing's paid off. The problem is, everyone's living so long. So people get to year 7, they're like, why am I still paying for this? I'm like, well, unfortunately, you've been paying half of it to life insurance, right? And so we didn't really like that plan. As a team, we thought it wasn't the best, so we decided to just do payment options up to 5 years without life insurance. But there are life insurances that you can purchase. There's no health questions, that sort of thing. We have 5-year payment options. The money is gaining interest. Now we get the interest first, okay? And because we get the interest first, we guarantee our cost. So if you prearrange today and you live another 10 years, we can't ask your family for another penny on anything we've guaranteed. We can only pull from the interest, okay? Interest rates are not very good right now. So usually inflation is outpacing interest. But I've had a few prearrangements that have been gaining interest for a long time. I have one from 1994 I just reviewed with a lady. She has a little bit in there, right? Because it's been gaining interest. When we pull it, then we take the interest and we cover the inflation. Because caskets aren't $500 anymore like it was when she prearranged, right? So we need the interest to cover. That interest is tax-free. It's a special funeral and cemetery allowance where we can put money aside tax-free. It's just like a tax-free savings account, but it's called an EFA, Eligible Funeral Assignment. So I always say this is our little secret we have at the funeral home, where you can kind of put money aside tax-free, the government can't touch it, okay? So unfortunately, we're not allowed to really advertise it, but definitely it's something that financial planners should know about because we can hide some money just for your funeral. The other thing is it doesn't go through probate, it doesn't get frozen, it's sitting here ready to go for that time when the call happens. Thanks. And then why do we prepay? So we want to alleviate any burdens. We want to prevent overspending. We want to provide peace of mind, and we want to lock in the pricing. Okay, I'm getting to the end, I promise. We do have a travel insurance plan. All it is if you pass away anywhere outside of 100 kilometers of your residence, this plan kicks in and it brings you back. So whether you're in Cuba, whether you're in Africa like my dad, wherever you are, it brings you back. And it also brings back all of your paperwork, all of the death certificates, everything that you want, that we need, it brings it all back. It's a one-time fee, and there's no health questions or age restriction. So if you're still a traveler and you're concerned about traveling with your health, you can get this travel insurance. It is a standalone product, so you don't have to pre-arrange with me to have this insurance. You can do it separately. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly touch on bereavement supports that are in our area. So Oakland Health, they have a free one-on-one support person for up to a year for anyone in Burlington. Carpenter Hospice has wellness groups. Grief Share is a 6-week course through a church. They do a really great job. I think it's about $15 for the booklet. Thrive Counseling is over at the mall, and they do counseling based on your income. Coast is an emergency company. So if you, for whatever reason, feel like someone's in an emergency situation, you can call Coast and they'll help out. And then of course one of our professional partners here, they also do grief counseling as well. Compassionate. Okay, I'm just gonna end on this, and it's just the idea that grief is love's unwillingness to let go. So it's important that we plan for these times. It's important that we know it's important. And I'm really grateful that you had me speak today. I am more than willing to chat with anyone, and I just want to say thanks.
Anybody with any questions for Sarah?
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment. It's really good to prepay or at least talk to a funeral home about what you want. When my mother died, she wanted to be divided into 2 cookie jars and be buried with each of her 2 husbands. And my sister just was not going to have that. And when the funeral home said, this is what your mother has arranged, do you still want it? Then she said, yes, we'll do whatever my mom wanted. But only because she had prearranged all this with the funeral home did she get what her wishes were.
Mm-hmm. Sisters never listen to sisters, do they?
Sarah, you mentioned about the family that were in Ottawa, now in Burlington, transfer the funds. Is there a handling fee to transfer from one funeral home to another?
So in our legislation, the funeral home that is releasing the funds is allowed to take up to $350 out of the account. I will say the commission-based company, large funeral homes will do that. The family-owned won't typically do that. So if you transfer out of Smith's, we won't take any handling fees at all. If we're taking a transfer in and that company has taken out the $350, we just discount $350 off.
It was an excellent talk. I just have a little extra information to provide about grief counseling. There is a phenomenal organization called the Coping Center in Cambridge. They offer group support for free, for as long as needed, for any type of grief, whether it's child or suicide or what have you. I support them annually through a fundraiser, but it's little known, and Cambridge is not that far, so something that can be ongoing and free and supported. It's a great center, and I'm not sure if you knew that, but now you do.
Yeah, if you want to pass along some info, that'd be great next time we're here.
You had mentioned that you could make the person look good. Did you mean embalming?
So it can mean embalming, and it doesn't have to mean embalming. So for example, when someone passes away, their mouth and their eyes are open. And so sometimes it's just as little as us closing the mouth and closing the eyes, giving, washing the hair, shampooing the hair, cleaning the fingernails, and just placing them in clean clothing. Sometimes that's all it needs.
Wouldn't that be done already?
No, that's our job.
That's your job?
Yep.
Okay, you didn't
Yeah.
mention that.
Sorry. It can be as little as that, where they look a lot nicer than they did. We've had a few maid families that have requested that, and we've done that with no embalming. Yeah. But my grandmother was embalmed.
I'm wondering if I made the mistake of making both of my sons power of attorney, because I hear that they both have to sign at the same time, at the same place. And one's in Thunder Bay, one's near Ottawa, you know. So is one better?
So it is a commitment for your sons to be power of attorney, for sure. So I would say that listed for executors, like trustworthiness, time, you know, are they able, how often do they come, are they able to come? It might be okay, but if there's someone closer that can maybe come to the hospital when you're there in an emergency situation, that might be someone you might want to put as a primary or secondary or however you want to do it. But that's definitely a question for a lawyer, but it is a conversation you need to have with your sons. If something were to happen to me and you have to get down in Burlington right away, is that okay with you? Right? That's a good conversation.
Sorry, I was just going to comment on the power of attorney for property. The complication when you're talking about assets ends up being when two kids are in separate places and they have to sign off. If they both have to jointly sign off, releasing money, making any changes to the account, nothing can be acted upon. So that just sort of slows down the process if there's a immediate crisis or a need. One close one is less complicated, as long as they have the ability and the knowledge to act in that capacity.
Marion has a question, hold on.
Actually, Mila, so when you're signing power of attorney, what if, like for in your case, if you're having released funds or something, powers of attorney, do they have to be in person, or can you do stuff in DocuSign or electronic signatures?
First, we have to verify the identity of the power of attorney, because nothing tells us that son A or daughter B actually signed and that's their signature. So once we get either proof of ID, so passport or driver's license in Ontario, they have to actually sign something so we have the indemnity. Then they don't have to actually sign in person, as long as it comes back. But if we've not met them, we end up saying you need to get this notarized, because that protects the brokerage, that protects the advisor, and that actually in the end protects the kids. Thanks.
She's right there.
I'm under the impression that a power of attorney dies when you do, and it has to be the executors that take over after you die.
That's correct, yeah. So power of attorney is only when you're living, and executor is when you pass. We have a lot of power of attorneys call us saying, I'm in charge, and we'll say, we have to verify that with your will.
Can you tell me what the rules are in Ontario, and maybe if you know across the country, in regarding to spreading ashes?
Great question. I didn't bring that up actually, but so if you're taking remains on an airplane, it has to be in an X-rayable container, and there is documents that we provide that you have to have. One of the documents, depending on the country, you need to to have a long form death certificate. Long form death certificates are through Service Ontario, and they take 6 to 8 weeks. So if someone is planning a trip, don't buy the ticket before you talk to us, because you might not have all your documents available. But scattering of remains, once you get to that other country, it's up to the country that decides. So that's one option. The other thing is, for example, we scattered my grandpa in Alberta in his fishing hole. So as long as it's a body of water or crown land, it's not privately owned, you're okay. And you can also scatter on your own property, and you can get permission to scatter on someone else's property. So like a friend's cottage, but like I said, when I said the golf course reference, that's privately owned. You need to have permission. That's kind of what
Those rules are throughout Canada?
Those are Ontario rules, for sure. I would say each province has their own regulations, but definitely those are the Ontario rules. And they're under the Bereavement Authority of Ontario website.
I just wanted to mention that when my mother, I was a power of attorney for my mother. Now, my uncle was a lawyer, and he said we should have two. And I said, Mom, you can pick whoever you want, but only have one. Because she had dementia. So I was paying all the bills. And I said, I don't want to have to drive around and get somebody else to sign.
Yeah. This will probably surprise you all. So I'm my parents' first power of attorney. My brother is the second power of attorney, so if I'm unable to, he's the backup. He's the executor. I am not the executor. Even though I do this for a living, I am not the executor. And it's not that I don't have trustworthiness. I don't have time availability. So I took myself out on purpose. Just wait for Neela to bring the mic around, sorry.
Sorry. This is before death, back to power of attorney, although I think an executor, you brought up excellent points about you want someone to be able to handle it because it is a lot of work and it often is more than a year in length. With power of attorney, my brother and I the lawyer can put a clause in saying and or, so that it doesn't require both of you to act. One of you can act if the other is not able to. If they don't put that clause in and you have two names, then you both have to.
Yeah. The idea of and is together, or is separate, but together, yeah. There's a couple up here. Sorry, Neela, you have to be me today. Payback.
I just wanted to make a comment. In talking with the lawyer, I had the 3 kids on as serving different aspects as executors. One is now living in the States. He said, that's a no-no. It's just a headache. So you don't want to do it now, then as soon as you pass, they have to. So I called him and said, what do you think? He says, I don't need to be on, take it out.
Yeah. If your kids sat here through this presentation, they'd say, take me off. Yeah, right? So there's one up here, Neela, that's been waiting, sorry.
Friend at the end.
First of all, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been absolutely amazing. And thanks to Marion for putting these on every month. My question is there anyone that you can hire professionally to be your executor, as opposed to asking a friend or a family member or whatever?
Yes. So there are professional trustees. Debbie Stanley actually was one of our presenters, so you can see her presentation online. Some lawyers can be trustees. Some banks have trustees. So there are people who can do that role. I actually really like working with them because they just send us a quick email and then it's pretty quick, yeah. And the ones I work with, they're really good with communicating with the family. So I would highly recommend if you have kids in another province or another state, those are really good options for sure.
Make a comment. Thank you, Sarah. I know you. And if it wasn't for Sarah and Smith's last year, I would have had a really hard time. I used them on 2 occasions. You made everything so wonderful.
Thanks. That wasn't planned.
I'm not really sure what I'm asking. I heard that there's an alternative to burial. It sounds like it's some kind of a condo.
Yeah, so you're talking about composting. So there is some composting that's become illegal in the state, legal in the States. It started in Seattle. Actually, there's a really neat TED talk about it. Basically, the idea is that they have a building and they wrap you in a certain shroud that, again, similar to green burial, but like the idea is to help become decomposing material. So as you kind of go through the building, by the time you get to the bottom, it's compost, basically. That's the plan. So
I got the idea this was more, that's just where you remain, like that's your spot, and you know who's gonna be beside you. And
so you might be talking about green burial, where it's...
And I heard everybody name.
You mean like a mausoleum, like a wall?
Kind of like that.
Oh, okay.
Upscale version, I guess.
Yeah, so there are cemeteries that have walls for caskets, so they're called mausoleums, and they go in the walls. Yeah, those are available at cemeteries. Yeah.
There's somebody else on this side and that side.
I guess I would like you to clarify power of attorney and the executor. Now, are there different types of power of attorney, like power of attorney for your money, power of attorney for your health care, whatever?
Yeah.
I know that the executor takes over everything, but I think we have assigned two different power of attorneys, one for health and one for finances.
I know they're all legal terms, right? So it's not something we use in regular speech, but power of attorney for property actually means your finances. So property means finances, even if you don't own property, that's what they're talking about. Power of attorney for personal care means health care. So a lot of times the personal care one is a little bit longer when I see it because it has a few little things in there like don't want to be on a feeding tube. Like there's things like that in it. Power of attorney for property just means if I'm unable to pay my bills, if I'm unable to do something financially, this person can do it on my behalf. The difference is with power of attorney is they can't just go into your bank and take money out for themselves, right? Like they have to show that it's going to you. So for example, I just recently bought my first home and my mom and dad wanted to gift us the down payment. Now I'm not joint on their account, I'm only power of attorney. So I couldn't go in and take my down payment out, right? Because I'm giving it to myself. They have to actually write a check and give it to me. So that's the difference. Power of attorney is doing things on your behalf. It does end at death. So we've had this happen many times where someone will say, I've been the power, especially it seems to be daughters, I've been the power of attorney this whole time. I've been paying mom's bill this whole time since she's been in the nursing home. I pay her bills, I do her taxes, I do everything. And I'll say like, well, who is the executor on the will? And she'll say, well, my brother, but what does that matter? I've been doing this the whole time. And I'll have to say, I'm really sorry, but actually you legally, not that I say this, but you legally mean nothing to me now. It's the executor who I have to talk with. And so I would never say that to someone, but that's the legal responsibilities that we have is we can now only talk to your executor as your person.
Question on this.
Hi, you've talked a couple of times about embalming yes, embalming no.
Yeah.
Could you explain that for me?
Sure. This is great for you, Kara. So I'll talk about embalming at the cellular level. So when we lose oxygen, so oxygen stops coming into our body, there's something in our cell. So in our cell, there's something that wakes up. And it only wakes up when we don't have oxygen. That's why oxygen is so important, right? It wakes up and it's called a lysosome. And what it does is its only job is to eat the cell wall. That's its only job. So once there's no oxygen in your body, the cell wall gets opened, and then what's in the cell then starts coming into your system. So this sometimes happens while we're living. You've all heard of the word term sepsis, right? Fluid in them. So that's your cells not having enough oxygen, and so the cell wall is not working properly, and so sepsis happens, right? So that happens in our bodies naturally. It's a natural occurrence in our bodies. It's supposed to happen this way. So what we do is we follow the path of oxygen through your body, through the blood system, and we coat the cell wall. Okay, so we just coat it. And it actually looks like Pepto-Bismol. So just to give you that. I think of it as coating my stomach acid, right? It coats the cell wall so that when the lysosome wakes up, which it's supposed to do, it can't get through, okay? So that's the process of embalming. We're just slowing down what's naturally occurring, okay? Now, when I talked about my grandmother losing stuff here, right? There's actually parts we can add to that fluid that's called a surfactant. So it's in your shampoos. It makes you, when you're shampooing your hair, it makes your hair really, really like fluffy, right?
Your body.
You know when you have good shampoo and bad shampoo it doesn't feel good, but the good one you're like all fluffy? That's called surfactant. So it actually coats you a little bit more so that if you had sinking in cheeks, it kind of puffs it a bit. So for me, when the funeral director said, do you want her to look like she used to, he added a little bit of that extra fluffiness, if that makes sense. So it just covers where the blood goes to. We don't take anything out when it comes to organs or anything like that. We actually are supposed to keep the body together. So even if we have like an autopsy or something like that, we don't remove anything. Everything stays the same. We just basically coat the cell wall through the body. So that's the most technical term to say. We're just basically slowing down the natural process. It does eventually happen, but that's what embalming is. I should be hired by Humber College. Yeah.
Actually, I'm making my way over.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you mentioned that, but one thing that's really important is to, if you've chosen executors, tell them and let them know and where things are.
Okay, my question is around executors. So my husband is power of attorney and executor for his mom's everything. So when she passes, and she's 98, she will be 98 June 4th, but in planning ahead, does that joint account thing still apply? So he's not joint account, but he has access to all her, and then he can divide it, you know, amongst the children.
If he's just power of attorney, then it does get frozen. If he's joint, then it doesn't.
Okay, thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Now, I will give a little snippet. There are a few banks that are catching on to this. They're catching on that children are putting them joint with their parents so that they don't have probate. So what is happening to a small percentage of the population, it's very small, is the bank is seeing, okay, we have an elderly lady and her son is on joint, but there's other children. So we're gonna say, you know what, even though you're joint with your son, we're concerned that he's gonna take all the money and not gift to the other children. So even though you're joint, we're gonna still freeze the account because we're catching on to this. Now, when the times I've seen when they don't do this, and this is a hint to everyone here, is if you have TD account, let's say, and your mother has TD account, you're considered a secure person to them. You're secure, right? If you have a Royal Bank account and your mom has a Royal Bank account, you're secure. If you have Royal Bank and she has TD, you are not secure to them. You're not considered a secure, they haven't identified you, you know. So I'm seeing with families, if they are at the same bank, they're treated better, more secure, than if they're at separate banks. So of course I take that information and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna open up a Nova Scotia account because my mom's at Nova Scotia and I wanna be a secure person. So now, this doesn't happen across the board. It doesn't even happen like to every family. It's just something that sometimes the banks are now picking up.
And the second part of this then is, can he still get on as a joint account if she has dementia?
No. No. Because you can't do something for your own benefit, right? I know, no, it's your own benefit, yeah.
Sorry, it's just in a comment. The reason why if somebody is diagnosed with dementia, it's because they don't have capacity to sign for the agreement of joints with rights of survivorship.
Yeah. Thanks, Neela.
Hi, so I actually work in the trust and estate space,
Yeah.
and I'm actually just here as an observer.
Yeah.
So I just want to comment further to your answer, Sarah, about the bank account. So one thing to note, and it's shocking that the banks took this long to catch on, and that this is the first time hearing that they're catching on,
Yeah.
is that typically if you're an adult child and you're joint on a parent's account, what we call, and I'm not a lawyer, but I worked in the trust field for 12 years, is that you're on there for joint for convenience. So
Yeah.
it's actually not your account, you're on there to help the account holder. And so the banks, what they should do is not treat it as a joint account, but they often do.
Yeah.
So hearing that means they may be starting to not
They
do that
are.
anymore, so it's
Yeah.
really a roll of the dice as to
Yeah.
how they'll deal with that account.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, that secure thing, that helps. And then, like she mentioned, if it's that person's account, then you never invested any of your own funds into it. So it's not technically joint because it's not your funds. So I put like $20 on my mom's account every once in a while. So I've invested some funds in there.
Sorry, just on this topic for
Yeah.
clarity again. We were able to have my mom sign before she was cognitively declining, so two of us are on an account. My question is, so say I have a daughter and I want to put her on my account, we're saying that the banks now are saying we are aware of that and that's not a good thing to do? I'm just confused here a little bit.
Yeah, so it's kind of the idea is that if you're it's supposed to be that if it's joint, it means you both contributed, it's both of your money, right? Because like I said, when that person dies, it automatically is this person's. So that's another thing about having someone on your account. If they go through divorce or bankruptcy, that's their funds, right? So yeah, not all banks are catching on. By the way, this is just a few minor families have gone through it. And the only time I've seen it is when the person wasn't a secure bank holder, and there was many beneficiaries. Okay, so there's many people who the bank doesn't feel secure with. So it's very minor, but it is starting to happen.
One more, that's
Last question. Yeah, go ahead, Neela.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a comment because we see this a lot, especially as clients begin to age. And this isn't to do with a bank or bank accounts, which are highly liquid. This has to do with investable assets. So if you have a non-registered investment account, what we see a lot is that parents will joint it with their adult children. So two things we have to remember. As soon as you joint it with someone who is not your spouse, technically that is considered a deemed disposition because now the ownership went from mom to mom and adult child, change of beneficial ownership. First thing. Second thing, when you joint it with your children, if they are in a marriage and that marriage breaks down, those assets are subject to part of divorce equalization. Okay, so just so we're aware of that, what prevents that is if you're going to joint an account with a kid, for other reasons, if it's joint tenant in common, that says that your kid is entitled to pretend 50%. If there was a marriage breakdown, all that can be part of the value is 50%, not the whole account. Okay. So we deal with that a lot, and most people, when they're doing it with the, hey, I just want to make it easier for my kid that if I die, there's a roll of assets. Until you die, there are complications that can happen, definitely.
So thank you, Sarah, thanks, Neela, thank you, everybody, great questions. What was the one thing we were supposed to, if we forgot anything, did we learn anything? Who do they call if something did I today? Remember. Great, thank you. So this slide is here every month, and Sarah spoke about that. It's about plan ahead. So part of the purpose of these sessions is to give you the tools and the equipment and the resources and the people who to talk to help you plan well in advance. This session it's recorded. It will be posted on the Empowered Senior Speaker website. I will send out a link to the recording. I'll send out the copy of the slide deck. But this one is there as well as past sessions with the exception of 2. So it's empoweredseniors.ca. You can find all those good resources there. Once again, thanks to all our educational partners. You've met them before. Please do take the time to learn more about what they do and make some connections with them. Please fill out your evaluation forms. They are valuable to us and they do provide us good information. And once again, congratulations to us all, and thank you very much for your great support. Be sure to pick up your treat on the way out, and thank you. Have a safe drive home.